A wonderful day to all of you. Today is a beautiful day with a charming lady like me. So hi everyone, this is Miss Rosalyn Balaba from College of Education, Betalat-17B. So this time, I will report the Chapter 7, The Learners in Other Marginalized Group. Marginalized group. Different group of people within a given culture, context, and history at the risk of being subjected to multiple discrimination due to interplay of different personal characteristics or ground, such as sex, gender, age, intensity, religion or belief, health status, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, education or income, or living in a various geographic localities. The term marginalization refers to individual or groups who live at the margin of society. It also called social exclusion. Next, we have marginalization in education. According to UNESCO, is a form of acute and persistent disadvantage rooted or underlying social inequalities. So, marginalization is a process of making a group or class of people less important or relegated to secondary position. Marginalization occurs when there is a social discrimination. So, the different types of discrimination. We have first gender discrimination or gender bias. So, which is if the boy student more important than girl student, this is found as discrimination. Next is religion or beliefs. So, some students are discriminated because they are different religion, and some of them they can accept what they are believing. Next is literacy. So, some students are discriminated because they don't know how to read and write. Next is linguistic discrimination. And so, language discrimination occurs when the person is treated different because of her native language. The last one is sexual orientation. So, this happens when someone treats you worse than other person in similar situation because of her sexual orientation. Next is marginalization and inclusion. According to Ban Ki-moon, the youth are often at the front line to stand against discrimination, inequality, and marginalization. The youth are the force for transformation. He stressed that how marginalization is defined varies from context to other, and people may have varied perspective on who they think is being marginalized. For example, if you are a person with disability and you are denying access to education because teacher did not know how to accommodate your needs, so you are marginalized. So, what causes marginalization? It was highlighted that marginalization is caused by a lot of factors. One, paradigm, prejudice, and biases to a certain group or sector in society contribute to the issue of marginalization. What can young people do to address marginalization? It was empowering to observe that the participant consistently recognized the fact that they, as young people, can contribute to addressing the issue of marginalization in society. Next, we have the different learners in marginalization group. First, we have child labor or domestic worker. Child labor is the practice of having children engage in economic activity on part or full-time basis. So, at the young age and they are already working, the children will be lead in harmful their physical and mental development. It affects to the life of children because they experience poverty, lack of goods, schools, and growth of informal economy as a considered as causes of child labor. According to International Labor or Organization or ILO, child labor affects 215 million minors worldwide. So there are 215 million minors in worldwide children who are working instead of going to schools. So they remain illiterate, which limit their ability to contribute their own well-being as well as to community they live. So, what can we do as a person to stop child labor? To donate funds in NGOs working for this rehabilitation of street children, to make the rural people aware about in the benefit of education, to help government to stop child labor. Impact of child labor on academic performance. Child labor generates negative effects that hinder the child's cognitive, emotional, and social development. In a majority of cases, child labor makes adequate child and youth inclusion in the educational system difficult. Why? Because child gives their time for their work and it's a long time period. So their attention in academic activity is reduced to fatigue produced by labor. So, as a future educator or teacher, we need to motivate and inspire our students and support their needs and make strategies to help your student to learn easily. Next, we have indigenous people. Indigenous people generally share a common sense of identity and common characteristics such as language, religion, tribe, nationality, race, or combination. So, there are 110 indigenous people communities numbering between 15 million to 20 million. In Luzon, there are 30%. In Visayas, there are less than 10%. In Mindanao, there are more than 60%. So, child labor and indigenous people are both experience discrimination, poverty, and for wage and adequate education. To conclude, the government can help marginalized groups to reach in their position and help them to live better. Next is abuse children. Child abuse is when a parent or caregiver, whether through action or failing to act, causes injury, death, emotional harm, or risk of serious harm to a child. There are many forms of child maltreatment, including neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal emotional abuse, mental psychological abuse, financial economic abuse, and cultural identity abuse. So those abuse mentioned above are all combination of having physical or social abuse or neglect. Physical abuse may include beating, shaking, burning, and beating. So it is when you can physically see the injuries or different parts of body of the children or a child. So next is sexual abuse, any sexual activity that a child cannot understand or consistent to. It includes acts such as fondling, oral genital contact, and genital and anal intercourse. It also called exhibitionism. So, for example, touching or touching. If someone touch a child in sexual way, the child thinks it's just a touch, but it's actually harassment already. Neglect is most common form of child abuse. Child neglect can include physical neglect, emotional neglect, and educational neglect, and supervisory neglect. So physical neglect, which is the failure to provide physical necessity that a child needs. Next is emotional neglect, so which is the failure to provide affection toward the child. And educational neglect, it is the failure to provide education that child needs. Next is supervisory neglect, which to look out of the child well-being. So, those I've mentioned can be result to psychological abuse or emotional abuse. Next, we will proceed to refugees or displaced children. Displaced people include internally displaced people. So, if they are facing poverty first in their home communities, their situation gone worse when they are displaced on another place. Children who are displaced describe facing great poverty than they did in home communities. They have usually left behind their possession and with distraction on freedom of movement and regulation of profession, often their families and livelihood. If they are so, being displayed in other community can lead into interrupt schooling. Children may face a lot of trouble to access the school. So, if they are going to display in other community, they were already marginalized by the society. Next is children in conflict zone. Conflict zone refers to war or political instability that disrupt essential service such as housing, transportation, communication, sanitation, water, and health care, which requires the response of people outside of the community affected. So, if there is a conflict zone, those essential services that I've mentioned are disclosed and cut off. 1 out of 4 children worldwide live in this dangerous situation. Children there are being deliberately recruited as combatants. So instead of holding a pen, they are holding guns. So they are being as a considered soldier or combatant, and sometimes they are being used to beat to the enemy. Violence among the most severe problems which all children and women face during armed conflict is highlighted risk of rape, sexual, prostitution, and other form of gender-based violence. Women of all age are targets, but adolescent girls are especially vulnerable. While the most victims have been girls, young boys are also raped or forced into prostitution. All true such cases are generally underreported. So sometimes when we hear like rape, they will always think that the victim is a girl. We often forget boy can also be raped, victim that they can be forced to do something or such as thing. Both during and after conflict, children remain exposed to the dangers of landmines. So, even after the conflicts or after the war, children are still in danger. So, children born of war are commonly faced with stigma, discrimination, abandonment, and infanticide. The closure of school during conflict and war result in child being pushed into the street. So, children we're going to experience being talked by town, hearing bad words toward them, discriminated, abandonment by their families, so even the communities. So, to prevent having marginalization inside or even outside the class, teacher can be guided do the following. So, first is start paying attention to what you say. Be willing to accept correction. Educate your own community. Removing existing barriers. Offer support and comfort. Influence other children in the classroom and make them aware of something. And that's all. Thank you. Again, my name is Miss Rosalyn Balaba. Thank you. Bye.